For years, we've believed a simple story, a good ancient kingdom against an alliance of 20 evil kingdoms. But what if that's the biggest lie of all? What if the ancient kingdom's greatest enemy wasn't an enemy army, but itself? Today, we're going to tear up the history books and reveal the tragic truth of the Void Century. It wasn't a war of conquest, it was a war of brothers. This theory not only fills in the gaps in history, but redefines the very central conflict of One Piece. Prepare yourselves, because the truth about the fall of the ancient kingdom is far more personal and darker than the world government ever wanted us to know. The narrative we know, based on Ohara's discoveries, is clear. 900 years ago, there was an immensely prosperous and powerful kingdom, whose name has been erased from history. This kingdom was destroyed by an alliance of 20 other kingdoms, which then formed the world government and spent the next 800 years hunting down anyone who tried to discover the truth. It's a classic story of good versus evil, of a benevolent empire destroyed by greed and fear. But this story has a hole. How could such an advanced kingdom, which likely had control over the ancient weapons and technology centuries ahead of its time, be defeated by a simple alliance of kingdoms that, at the time, were far less developed? It's like a modern army being defeated by 20 medieval tribes. It simply doesn't add up. The fall of the ancient kingdom could not have been caused by an external force. The rot, the weakness that allowed its destruction had to come from within. The story the world government tells us is a convenient simplification, a half-truth designed to hide a sin far greater than simple conquest. The complexity and power of the ancient kingdom, suggested by technologies like the giant robot and the possible creation of devil fruits, make its defeat by a technologically inferior enemy almost impossible. It would take an internal collapse, sabotage, or a division of forces for such a great power to fall. The enemy wasn't at the gates. He was already in the throne room. The theory is this: the ancient kingdom was divided by an ideological fracture, personified by two figures of power. On one side, we had Joy Boy. As the bearer of Nika's power, the warrior of liberation, his ideology was one of absolute freedom, peaceful coexistence with all races, fishmen, minks, and sharing the joy and prosperity of the kingdom with the entire world. He was an idealist, a dreamer. On the other side, let's imagine another faction, led by a figure we know today as Aimu. This faction also wanted peace, but through order and control. They saw Joy Boy's ideology as dangerous and naive. For them, sharing their advanced technology and the power of the ancient weapons with the inferior world would lead to chaos and destruction. They believed that the ancient kingdom, being superior, had the right and duty to rule the world, to impose a forced peace for the good of all. It was the vision of the benevolent dictator versus that of the chaotic liberator. This ideological tension simmered until it exploded into a civil war that divided the most powerful kingdom in the world in two. The war was not for territory, but for the soul of the planet's future. Aimu, perhaps a nobleman or a high-ranking scientist, saw Joy Boy's freedom as a threat to the very fabric of reality, an invitation to anarchy that would destroy everything they had built. Aimu's faction likely championed secrecy, hierarchy, and strict control of information and power. If the idea of Aimu and Joy Boy being leaders of opposing factions within the same kingdom changes everything for you, then help spread this hidden truth. Leave a like to show you're on the side of the revelation. And if you don't want to miss the unfolding of this ancient war, subscribe to One Piece Secrets. The Civil War was devastating. Ancient weapons were likely used by both sides, causing destruction that shattered the world's geography. In this scenario of stalemate and mutual annihilation, Aimu's faction, the Order faction, took a desperate and treacherous action. They made a pact with the 20 outer kingdoms.
Imu offered a deal. Help us crush Joy Boy's faction and its dangerous ideals, and we will give you a place in a new world order. We will form a world government, and you will be the founding royalty, the Celestial Dragons. For the 20 kingdoms who feared and envied the power of the ancient kingdom, it was an offer they couldn't refuse. They weren't strong enough to conquer the kingdom on their own, but they were the force needed to tip the balance in a civil war. They became Imu's army. The fall of the ancient kingdom was not a conquest, it was a betrayal. Imu's faction opened the gates to the enemy to destroy their own brothers. The great sin that the world government hides is not a war, but a fratricide on a global scale, orchestrated by the figure who now rules the world from the shadows. This also explains why the Nefertari family of Alabasta refused to become celestial dragons. They may have agreed to help stop a dangerous war, but refused to be part of the tyranny that followed, disgusted by the ultimate betrayal. History was not written by the victors, it was written by the traitor. After the victory, Imu and his new allies had a problem. They couldn't simply erase Joy Boy's history, they needed to erase the very existence of the Civil War to hide the original betrayal. So they created the lie of the lost century. They merged the two factions into a single entity, the Ancient Kingdom, and painted it as an evil enemy that was bravely defeated by the alliance of the 20 kingdoms. They transformed a complex history of ideological conflict into a fairy tale of good versus evil. That's why research is so forbidden. If someone were to discover the truth, they wouldn't just discover about Joy Boy, they would discover that the founder of the world government himself, Imu, was from the Ancient Kingdom, and that the celestial dragons are only in power because they allied with a traitor. And the will of the D? The D are the direct descendants of Joy Boy's faction. They are the heirs to the ideology of freedom, the lineage of those who were betrayed. They are the natural enemies of the gods, because they carry in their blood the memory of a truth that Imu spent 800 years trying to bury. They are living proof of Imu's original sin. The D in their names may be the initial of a lost name, or perhaps a symbol that represented Joy Boy's faction. They are the will that Imu couldn't erase, a persistent bug in the perfect control system he tried to create. The Lost Century isn't a mystery about a lost nation. It's the tragic story of a utopia that self-destructed. The final war in One Piece won't be Luffy against an alien tyrant. It will be Luffy, the heir to Joy Boy's ideology of freedom, against Imu, the heir to the ideology of order at any cost, ending the civil war that began 800 years ago. Luffy isn't just fighting to liberate the world, he's fighting to prove that his ancestor Joy Boy's worldview was the correct one. He's fighting to redeem his people's failure. One Piece and Laugh Tale doesn't just contain the story of a war, it contains the story of a broken family, the truth of a betrayal that gave rise to the world as we know it. And the revelation of that truth will not only bring down the world government, it will rewrite the very meaning of hero and villain in history. The final battle won't be about conquering a throne, but about choosing which vision for humanity's future will prevail. Luffy, by laughing like Roger, will be laughing at the irony that the greatest war in the world started as a family feud. But what about you? Do you think the war was internal? Which side would you choose? Joy Boy's chaotic freedom or Imu's controlled peace? Leave your opinion in the comments. Thanks for watching, and see you next time on One Piece Secrets.